Hey, so it's vlog day 18. Yeah, I think 18. I always get this bit wrong. It's somewhere through. And I want to do a quick, it's late at night, I'm getting to this late, but again, it's just to repeat, it's that thing about consistency. If I've said I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. So here I am. I want to talk a little bit about reading. I added reading, I think, to my task list. I'm doing a few different 30-day, trying to force myself to do things and have a schedule. So a 30-day challenge of reading. And it's not like I'm not reading a huge amount in terms of time. I've put it on my target to read at least 15 minutes, and I might read up to an hour when I sit down for a session, but typically I'm averaging between 30 and 45 minutes. I read non-fiction books mainly, things like personal development, business books, and to a lesser degree historical books or biographical books, things like that. And I can read through one of those books, and they can be, a lot of people consider that sort of quite dense, difficult material. I can read through one of those books in typically about 3 days, even with only that amount of time. So I wanted to share with you really quickly the tips that I have for how you could do that too if you wanted to read and get through a bunch of books much quicker than you might normally. First tip. Read the front and back cover and the table of contents. That will give you a brief idea of what the book's about. It will tell you about the authority of the author, so that you know, I guess you know how much you can trust the information. And the table of contents will give you an idea of what information you're going to get as you work through the book, which makes it much easier to absorb than if you just read and then trying to pick up what you're reading as you go along. Tip number 2, you have to try and stop yourself from mouthing the words. So that's something that we've all done since we were young. We were taught to read out loud, and there is a tendency, although we don't actually usually read out loud when we're reading, we do sort of mouth the words as we go along, even if we're doing it subconsciously. We can read much, much quicker than we can speak and understand it. So you have to stop yourself from doing that. I do that by just touching my tongue against the roof of my mouth or against my teeth, just to get rid of the temptation to mouth the words. And it means that I can read through much quicker. As a sort of tip number 3, or maybe as an extension of that, just to help the concentration, I'll read to music, although obviously music without lyrics, because I don't want to be distracted by other words when I'm trying to go through a book. So typically I use like EDM or dance music or classical music, so that I can get a bit more focus. 4th tip, you have to stop yourself from back reading. So back reading is like when you're reading a passage and you have that moment where you think, oh, what was it I just read? And you go back a few lines. And if you keep doing that and rereading the same stuff you've already read, then you're going to slow yourself down and make it much harder to get through it. So it's really easy to stop yourself from back reading. I just use a bookmark or something like that, and I'll put it on the page just above the line that I'm trying to read, and then just push the bookmark down at the pace that suits my reading, so that I literally can't see what I've just read, and it keeps me focused on what I'm trying to read. Obviously, when you're reading non-fiction books especially, typically there's quite a lot of repetition, so you'll find that even if you missed a little bit, it will come back later on, and you'll still be able to understand the chapter or the paragraph or whatever else is the section that you're reading, without having to constantly do this back reading. And there is a last tip. What was the last tip? Oh yes, and the last tip is about focus. So again, you have to stop yourself kind of reading right to left, right to left. You need to try to find a point close to the middle of the page and allow your peripheral vision to pick up the rest of the words. Now this does take a little bit of practice, and it might be that you use a couple of points on the page, so you just flick your eyes really quickly. But you have to stop yourself reading really slowly. You have to try and just absorb the words and trust yourself that you'll understand what you're doing, or you'll understand what you're reading, rather than having to literally carefully read every word. It does take a little bit of practice, but if you do that, you can soon work your way through a lot of books. It's something that I've done for a while, and it really helps me get through a lot of books quickly. So hopefully it helps you, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.